Welcome to Forbidden Texts. What you are about to see may shock you. It may surprise you, but will definitely challenge everything you thought you knew. Stick around until the end to discover the forbidden knowledge that they don't want you to have.
You were never meant to be whole. Not in the way society defines it. You were taught to chase the light, silence the dark, and call it healing. But what if I told you the real you, the powerful, awakened you, is buried in everything you've tried to escape? Welcome to Forbidden Texts, where we explore ancient knowledge and forgotten wisdom. They said spiritual awakening would feel like love, light, and peace. They lied. What they didn't tell you is that real awakening begins where comfort ends, when your illusions start to break, when the mask of your so-called higher self begins to crumble, and you're left staring at everything you've refused to see. That's the secret no one wants to talk about. Not in yoga class. Not in those pastel, filtered healing posts. And certainly not in the sanitized versions of enlightenment that flood your feed. You weren't born broken. You were taught to hide your cracks. Taught that anger was ugly, that sadness was weakness, that fear made you less spiritual. So you shoved it all down, buried it deep, and tried to smile through it. But energy doesn't disappear. It festers. It leaks. And eventually, it takes over. That's why you lash out without warning. That's why you're exhausted after meditation. That's why affirmations feel fake. The truth is, your shadow is not your enemy. It's the gatekeeper. And you can't fake your way past it with crystals, cold plunges, or mantras. You have to go in. Because the version of you you're trying to manifest, they're already in there, waiting. But they won't come forward until you're brave enough to face what you've been running from. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why your pain was never punishment, why your darkness was never a defect, and why the real transformation doesn't start with light, but with honesty. Keep watching. Everything you've been seeking, it's not out there. It's been hiding in the dark, waiting for you to stop running. They told you to raise your vibration, but never how to face the parts of you pulling it down. Here's the truth. The obsession with being positive all the time is spiritual sedation. It's a coping mechanism dressed in white robes. And it's killing your evolution. You think you're healing because you're calm. But suppression can look like peace when you've numbed yourself enough. The light you chase won't save you. Because light without shadow is blindness. Shadow work isn't about becoming good. It's about becoming real. This is the part they skip. Awakening isn't just bliss. It's brutal. It's ripping off the masks you didn't even know you were wearing. It's admitting the things you swore you'd never say out loud. It's feeling the anger, the shame, the jealousy, not judging it, but listening to what it's been trying to tell you. Because beneath every uncomfortable emotion is a memory you've locked away, and every one of those memories holds a piece of your power. You can't embody your higher self while abandoning the parts of you that still bleed. Keep going. You're about to see how the darkest parts of you were never dark at all. So what is shadow work? Really, it's not a trend. It's not a weekend workshop. It's the raw, unfiltered confrontation with who you truly are, beneath the conditioning, beyond the persona, outside the algorithm that trained you to be palatable. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious self, built from everything you've denied, repressed, or were punished for showing. But this isn't just theory. This is the missing blueprint. The shadow is formed in layers. Every time you were told, "Don't cry," a layer. Every time you were punished for anger, another layer. Every time you learned love was conditional, be quiet, be good, be useful, you buried your truth just to survive. Shadow work is peeling those layers back, one by one, and finally facing the parts of you that were deemed unacceptable. Not to destroy them, but to understand them. This isn't about indulging your darkness. It's about reintegrating the power you left behind with it. Most people confuse shadow work with trauma work or therapy. It's not the same. Therapy helps you cope. Shadow work reveals who you became to cope. It asks the uncomfortable questions no one else will. Who did you have to become to be loved? What parts of yourself did you kill to feel safe? It's not neat. It's not linear. And it sure as hell isn't pretty. But if you want to stop performing your life and start living it, you need to face the part of you that's been screaming in silence. That's where your transformation begins. And we're only getting started. You weren't born ashamed of yourself. You learned it. And it started earlier than you think. The shadow begins in childhood, not in some traumatic, explosive moment for everyone, but often in the quiet, repeated ways you were taught who you had to be. Maybe it was the way your parents flinched when you got angry. Maybe it was the silence after you cried too loud. Maybe it was the praise you only got when you were obedient, polite, quiet. You didn't stop expressing parts of yourself because they were bad. You stopped because they weren't safe. And that's the beginning of the split. You learn to disown the parts that don't earn love. You become what the world rewards. The rest, your real feelings, your wildness, your boundaries, gets buried deep. Not gone, just hidden. This is how the shadow forms. Every time you betrayed your needs to stay connected. Every time you wore a smile to avoid punishment. Every time your authenticity was met with rejection. So by the time you're grown, you've mastered the performance. You're likable. You're successful. Maybe even spiritual. But beneath the surface, the shadow still runs the show. It controls your relationships, repeating the same painful dynamics over and over. It shows up in your career, never letting you feel enough, no matter how far you climb. It sabotages your peace, because part of you still believes you don't deserve it. You're not broken. You're fragmented. Shadow work isn't about healing some mysterious inner demon. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that had to go underground just so you could belong. And until you do that, you'll keep searching for wholeness in places that will never give it to you. But here's the truth that changes everything. What you thought was weakness is actually your power in exile. And when you learn how to welcome it back, you stop performing and you start becoming. Keep listening. Because the next time you feel triggered, it might not be a breakdown. It might be a breakthrough trying to get your attention. Ever wonder why you overreact to the smallest things? Why someone's tone can ruin your whole day? Or why a simple rejection feels like a deep personal failure? That's your shadow talking. Not the surface version of you, the one that smiles and says, "I'm fine." The one underneath. The one that's been waiting quietly to be heard. The shadow doesn't just live in your memories. It hijacks your emotions, your habits, your identity. It shows up as jealousy you can't explain, as rage that feels out of proportion, as addiction dressed up as just one more, as perfectionism pretending to be ambition. Most of the time, you don't even know it's happening. You say, "That's just who I am." But it's not who you are. It's who you became to avoid feeling unsafe. Your shadow lives in your triggers. Every time you flinch at criticism, every time you sabotage intimacy, every time you play small, that's not random. That's unresolved. And here's the trick. Your shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It wants your attention. It wants you to stop lying to yourself. Because it's tired of being buried alive in your unconscious. You can meditate for hours. You can manifest every full moon. But if you're still at war with your own reflection, none of it will stick. Shadow work is the process of decoding your emotional reactivity. Not to silence it, but to finally understand it. Because once you recognize a trigger as a mirror, you stop blaming the world for your wounds, and you start healing at the root. This is why spiritual awakening doesn't feel like bliss in the beginning. It feels like unraveling. Because you're not just waking up, you're remembering everything you locked away to survive. And when you stop running from that pain, you gain access to something most people never touch: true, embodied power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates. And it only starts when you stop pretending you're not angry. Stop pretending you're not afraid. Stop pretending you're already healed. Because the moment you admit what's real, you take your life back. It hits without warning. One day, everything you've built, your identity, your beliefs, your routines, starts to collapse. The job doesn't fulfill you. The relationships feel hollow. The spiritual practices that used to bring peace now feel like distractions. You try to hold it together, but something inside is unraveling. This is the dark night of the soul. And if you're in it, you already know, it's not poetic. It's brutal. It feels like death, because part of you is dying. But here's what no one tells you until you're deep in it: that darkness is not a detour. It's the way through. The dark night isn't a punishment. It's a purification. It strips away every illusion, every false identity, every comforting lie you've been clinging to. Not to break you, to break through you. Because you can't fake transformation. You can't bypass pain and expect to be free. You can't chant your way around the parts of yourself that are still bleeding. This is where most people quit. They panic. They go back to the familiar. Back to pretending. Back to numbing. But if you stay, if you let the fire do its work, you'll come out forged. Clearer. Stronger. Real. Because the dark night exposes what your ego tried to protect you from. It forces you to confront your dependency on things outside of you. Validation, control, certainty. It shows you what was never real to begin with. And in that emptiness, when everything else is stripped away, you meet the part of you that doesn't need permission to exist. The part that's never been broken. The part that doesn't flinch in the dark. You won't find it in your comfort zone. You won't find it in spiritual entertainment. You'll find it in the ashes of who you thought you were. And once you do, there's no going back. You don't just wake up. You rise. And what comes next changes everything. So how do you actually do it? How do you face what's been buried for years, maybe decades, and not drown in it? Shadow work isn't just thinking about your past. It's about learning to feel what you were never allowed to feel, to see what you've been conditioned to ignore, and to own what you swore you'd never be.
A quick message. This space has become something truly special for many of us. A community of people on a shared journey of spiritual growth, healing, and awakening. Your comments and stories inspire me every day, and it's clear there's so much more we can create together, especially since this path can feel lonely at times. That's why we've created a spiritual space on Patreon, a sanctuary for deeper connection, exclusive content, and meaningful conversations with others from this channel who share your journey. Together, we can build something uplifting, authentic, and spiritually powerful. If this resonates with you and you'd like to be part of something bigger, whatever you're going through, you'll find the link in the description or pinned in the comments. Your membership not only helps support the channel, but also helps grow this beautiful community. Let's create something amazing together.
It's not abstract. It's a practice. One that requires your full presence. Not perfection, presence. Start with the triggers. The moments that make you overreact, shut down, lash out, or spiral. Those aren't random. They're maps back to the original wound. Back to the moment you decided, this part of me isn't safe. When someone criticizes you and you feel 10 years old again, that's the shadow. When you chase validation from people who remind you of the parent who never saw you, that's the shadow. When you sabotage love the second it feels real, you already know. You bring these moments to the surface, not to judge them, but to sit with them fully until they stop controlling you from the dark. Journaling isn't just writing. It's confrontation. Ask, what do I avoid feeling at all costs? What would I never admit out loud? Where am I pretending? The answers won't be pretty. They're not supposed to be. Because truth doesn't flatter, it frees. And don't underestimate your body in this. Your shadow lives there too. In the tight chest, the clenched jaw, the chronic tension. Let your body speak. Feel it fully. Move it. Shake it. Scream if you need to. This isn't about being civilized. It's about being whole. And then pay attention to your relationships. They are your mirrors. You're not just drawn to people who inspire you. You're drawn to people who reflect your wounds. The person who abandons you, they're showing you the part of yourself you abandoned first. The one who triggers your deepest rage, they're pointing to the piece of you that never had permission to express anger safely. Shadow work is a dismantling. It's uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. And it's the only way out of the prison you've been calling a personality. Because once you stop lying to yourself, you stop betraying yourself. And that's when something ancient in you begins to stir. The real you. Not the mask. Not the image. The you that doesn't need fixing, just remembering. You've probably heard the excuses. I've already dealt with that. I'm over it. I've done the work. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people who claim they've done the work are still neck deep in denial. Because the ego doesn't want to be exposed. It wants to be spiritual. And that's where the biggest trap of all lies. Spiritual bypassing. The moment you start dressing avoidance in sacred language, you've built a prettier prison. You're still hiding, but now you're doing it with incense, affirmations, and a false sense of superiority. You say it's intuition, but it's fear. You say it's protecting your peace, but it's emotional shutdown. You say it's boundaries, but really, it's avoidance. The shadow thrives in those spaces. It doesn't care how high vibrational your words are. It cares how honest you're willing to be. This is why most people get stuck. Not because the work is too hard, but because they've created a new identity around being healed. But healing isn't a destination. It's not something you post about once and move on from. It's a process of radical self-honesty over and over again. You'll know you're still avoiding your shadow when you spiritualize every conflict instead of owning your part. You only seek pleasure and avoid discomfort at all costs. You weaponize love and light to silence truth. That's not awakening. That's escape. The irony, you can't truly be in the light until you've faced your darkness. Anything less is a mask. And the longer you cling to it, the louder your shadow will scream. Through your relationships, through your addictions, through the quiet, haunting sense that something still isn't real. It takes courage to admit you're still bleeding. You just have to stop pretending it's not there. Because once you face it, you'll see it wasn't darkness trying to destroy you. It was truth, waiting to set you free. You want real transformation, then prepare to lose everything that isn't truly yours. This isn't a glow up. It's a death, not of your body, of your mask. The false self you built to be accepted, applauded, loved. That version doesn't survive shadow work. And it's not supposed to. You'll mourn it. The persona you spent years perfecting. The one who says all the right things, posts the right quotes, curates the right image. It did its job. It kept you safe. But safety isn't the same as freedom. And if you're here, it means the part of you that craves freedom is finally louder than the part that fears rejection. To transform, you must disintegrate. This is where most people turn back, because the ego starts to panic. It says, if I let go of this identity, who will I be? And the answer is, someone you've never met, but always been. It's terrifying, yes, but it's also the beginning of real power. The phoenix doesn't rise without first catching fire. And neither do you. You'll feel like you're losing everything. Your certainty, your stability, your sense of control. But look closer. What you're losing is the lie. The scaffolding of false belonging. The applause of people who never saw the real you. This is the sacred burn. Let it happen. Let the ego unravel. Let the story collapse. Because in that emptiness, something holy emerges. Not polished, not palatable, but raw, rooted, and real. This is the moment you stop chasing who you should be and start becoming who you actually are, without apology, without approval, without the mask. And what you find in that rubble, it's not weakness. It's power. Not the kind that dominates, the kind that doesn't flinch. This is what shadow work prepares you for. Not just healing, rebirth. Here's the part they never tell you. Buried beneath the shame, the rage, the grief you've spent your life avoiding, there are gifts. Yes, gifts. Your shadow isn't just the container for pain. It's the vault for your power. The emotions you rejected, they carry energy. Raw, unfiltered, unapologetic energy. And once you stop fearing them, you can start using them. Anger becomes clarity. Grief becomes depth. Fear becomes instinct. Shame becomes humility. All of it, fuel. But first, you have to stop seeing your darkness as a problem to fix. You have to start seeing it as a portal. Think about it, the version of you that's confident, grounded, expressive, they aren't created. They're reclaimed. Hidden beneath your conditioning is the part of you that never doubted your voice. The part that said no without guilt. The part that laughed too loud, danced without rhythm, loved without hesitation. You buried them to survive. Now you bring them back to live. This is the alchemy of shadow work. It turns pain into power. It transforms emotional weight into spiritual gravity. You stop being reactive and start becoming magnetic. Not because you're high vibe, but because you're real. And in a world full of performance, there is nothing more powerful than someone who is unapologetically whole. That's what your shadow's been trying to give you this entire time. Not just healing, but wholeness. Not just coping, but capacity. Not just surviving, but soul. This is where the game changes. When you stop hiding from your wounds and start harvesting their wisdom. Because the treasure was never in escaping the dark. It was in learning to see in it. So what happens after the work? When the masks are off. When the shadow is no longer a monster in the basement, but a part of your own reflection. What does life look like on the other side of confrontation? Here's the truth most won't admit. The work never really ends. But something fundamental shifts. You stop fearing your darkness. And that changes everything. You become dangerous in the best way, not because you hurt others, but because you can no longer be manipulated by your own unhealed wounds. You stop chasing validation. You stop attracting people who mirror your pain. You stop abandoning yourself just to keep the peace. You start setting boundaries that don't need to be explained. You speak with a voice that doesn't tremble. You rest without guilt. You love without performance. You walk into discomfort without flinching, because you've already met your demons and learned their names. This is the difference between spiritual image and spiritual embodiment. One is curated. The other is lived. You don't need to prove anything. Your energy says it for you. And yes, you'll still get triggered. You'll still feel pain. But now, instead of running, you'll listen. Instead of reacting, you'll respond. Because now, it's not weakness. It's signal. Integration means you don't reject any part of yourself anymore. It means your light has roots. And your shadow has purpose. You're no longer two people, one in public, one in private. You're one. Real. Grounded. Awake. And the world can feel it. Because presence doesn't need to announce itself. So no, there's no finish line. There's only truth, and the courage to keep choosing it. And the more you do, the more magnetic you become. Not because you're perfect, but because you're whole. And in a world addicted to the fake, wholeness is revolutionary. You were never meant to be all light. And you were never meant to be all shadow. You were meant to be whole. But wholeness isn't glamorous. It's not marketable. It's raw, complex, messy. And it's the only path that leads to actual freedom. Because all the love, peace, clarity, and power you've been chasing, they were never outside you. They were buried under the silence, the shame, the stories. Waiting. That's the final truth. Shadow work isn't a detour on the spiritual path. It is the path. The part most avoid. The part most never finish. But it's the one that sets you free. Real awakening doesn't look like floating away on a cloud of incense. It looks like standing in the wreckage of your old self, covered in ash, and knowing, I'm still here. But this time, you're not pretending. You're not performing. You're not pleasing. You're real. And from that place, you stop needing the world to tell you who you are. You already know. Because you've met every part of yourself, and you chose to stay. You want to transform. Don't just reach for the light. Make peace with your shadow. That's where your soul becomes sovereign. That's where your healing becomes embodied. That's where your transformation begins. Not in who you try to become, but in reclaiming who you already are.